I think about my first queer experiences, I would definitely say awkward,
innocent,
shock,
nervousness,
difficulty,
longing,
liberating,
relief, I think.
Beautiful.
Utter delight.
I think the first time I questioned my gender identity and my sexuality was around 7 years old. I was raised in a very religious family, so we were Jehovah's Witnesses. I'll let you digest that.
I kind of felt I was different from a very young age, like almost like, you know, in primary school. I remember like having a very odd thought back then, and I only realized it was odd like years later, and it was like, oh, I wish I was like a boy so I could treat the girls better than the boys are treating them now. But I thought it was completely normal until I started telling my friends about it, and they were like, none of us think like that.
I would have been maybe like 15 or something like that, and I'd be like home alone, and then you'd, you know, kind of run into like mum's or my sister's room and like kind of have a little try on of like, I don't know if it would just be like a top or a dress or a pair of shoes or something like that, or a bit of makeup, and then immediately feel deep shame and take it off and lie to myself that I was doing that.
I'm not sure I ever questioned my gender identity. I thought I was a woman. In my brain, I was a girl. And the only way that I was ever able to find happiness was to change my body.
When I was a little boy growing up in Malaysia, and I remember seeing like Spice Girls and Britney Spears, and I was like, oh my God, that is so camp and so gay, and I really freaking love it.
I think the first time I questioned or I knew something was up was when I was watching Transformers with Megan Fox. And I was like, what's going on? And then also my like gender identity from a very young age, I always remember saying to my friends, and I also remember bringing it up to like my mom, being like, Mom, I think I'm meant to be a boy.
I guess when I started questioning my sexuality, I was listening to a lot of pop music, and something funny actually at home was I'd listen to the radio and my mum would be really critical of what was playing. Like if Elton John was playing, she'd be like, turn that off because he's queer. So I would like wait for her to go shopping, and then I'd just like listen to whatever I wanted to listen to.
A lot of my experience with my sexuality and gender is through music. Just growing up in Malaysia, a lot of music that is like female empowerment, and then always have like really cute guys in the music videos, and I was like, hey, like I think I'm not attracted to women.
In my mid-teens is when I sort of started really grappling with what sexuality is, actually having a concept of, you know, there are what straight is, what gay is, and at the time I'd never heard of what bi was.
Year 3, I think it was, and I had this amazing kind of friendship with Sean Davis. He never knew, actually. He was a kind of friend without ever being a friend. I didn't even talk to him much. And I guess with hindsight, it was a crush. It was me going, I want to write his name on my pencil case. I want to have his name next to my name. I want to sit next to him in class, but I could never talk to him.
At 7 years old at Catholic school, I had a situation where I was playing with one of the boys in my class, and I got in trouble because we were trying to kiss each other. And it was mutual, it was consensual. The two of us were doing it, we were just mucking around. And I got isolated by one of the head priests. And my early memory of that day was, oh my God, they see me, something's wrong with me. And then being berated for doing something that wasn't even sexualized or anything really serious to me. We were just playing around. That was the first time I realized that there was something different about me.
I had to leave my hometown of Perth to let myself fly, if you like.
Why did you feel as though you had to leave?
Possibly it was something to do with recognising that I couldn't, be myself there. I had to find a new environment to grow in.
And tell me a bit about this photo.
This is the car that I left Perth in when I was in my early 20s, 22, 23 perhaps. And I just knew I had to leave. So this is my favourite, this is my little Carmine, Mrs. Robinson. She was just a gem. My freedom bus.
I remember when I was little, I wanted to understand myself better. I would go on chat rooms and talk to gay men in my small town. There's not a lot of them, just to, because I was really interested in finding out if there were other people like me. But at the same time, I would be very scared to meet people. I think it was all chat. I didn't meet anyone because there's this huge stigma. And I remember someone at that time was like, "Are you top or bottom?" And I was like, I didn't actually know. I didn't know at that, at that age, I was clueless. I didn't know what all of that meant.
When I was 21, I knew I had to come out. I'd done a whole lot of processing, I'd done a lot of thinking about it, and I remember going to my first gay club by myself, not knowing anyone, just taking myself there, even as an experience, and feeling incredibly alone, yet incredibly kind of excited. I went to a club at 9 o'clock at night, not knowing that that's when no one goes, and just went in and just danced. And dancing was my way of just being part of the community. And I just go and I dance. And weirdly, I would leave at about 12:30, just when it was getting crowded because I couldn't dance anymore.
I got to my early teens and that's when I got this understanding of what same-sex attraction means and what heterosexual attraction means, all that sort of stuff. And then when I entered the gay community when I was 17, 18, there's that pressure to be gay. And at that time I sort of heard about what bi was, and bisexuality is mocked in popular culture. It's either not visible at all or it's mocked and invalidated, and that's not really something you want to associate with. And throughout this whole period I was still sleeping with women, I was still having great relationships with women, but I was keeping it quiet.
A lot of people in Malaysia, or at least when I was still there, they didn't like to use the word gay because gay is always associated with being really feminine, or there's nothing wrong with that, but a lot of gay men in Malaysia, I think because they're not out, there's less stigma if they call themselves bi. So only after I moved to Sydney where I was comfortable saying that, hey, yes, I am gay and I am fabulous. But I feel recently I've started using the word queer because I feel queer is more inclusive, because queer is also about your gender identities, about your sexuality, and I feel queer includes the letters in LGBTQIA+.
Queer was a derogatory term, and like a lot of derogatory terms that sort of adopted and turned around in meaning by the group they're directed to. It was to do with just anything that didn't quite fit the norm. It wasn't anything to do with sexuality. Then it became directed toward same-sex attracted people. And now it's just generally, as I said, if you're not heterosexual, you can fit. You can be in that queer thing, as we know, because things keep getting added onto it.
Oh, I was using the pronoun she since I was a child to myself. I think publicly it would have been 18, as soon as I turned 18. That's the thing about trans people, especially binary trans people, that people don't realise is that I have no intention of smashing gender binaries. In fact, I protect my gender binary. I crossed from one gender to another. So my pronoun she is everything to me.
I never really understood the labels, to be honest. Queer, gay, I just didn't understand it. And you got to remember that we're talking about the 80s into the early 90s, which was all full on about HIV, all about AIDS. We're talking about those ads with the Grim Reapers. And this notion of kind of keeping yourself away from it was actually a self-protection. So whether I was gay or not, I was secretly always in love with men. The decision to be gay was a political decision. You had to be something, and you forced yourself into an identity. The idea of bisexuality wasn't even something I could contemplate from, good Christian boy kind of thinking. And so for me, this labeling was one of those things that I fell into a need to be political about the label I wanted to be. And so I could fit into a group, I could fit into a tribe. Queerness was something, I know, done by other people somewhere else. I mean, we're talking about Queensland as well. The notion of trying to be different, trying to step out was really difficult. So, you tried to blend in as much as you could just so you could survive.
I used to identify as bisexual. I think that stemmed from growing up in a really strict conservative household where straight was the only option, and I was a bit shy to come out fully and say what I wanted to say. I soft launched my she, they pronouns on Instagram because they came out with that feature where you could add your pronouns, I think. So I just put them there. I didn't tell anyone, but I was hoping that people would maybe notice. And queer for me just feels really good and homely. Some people see lesbian as exclusively women being attracted to women, but I don't want to limit myself like that. I am attracted to women who are cis, who are trans, who are questioning, non-binary, so queer kind of encapsulates that really well.
When the gender issues were kind of hitting fever pitch, and I sort of needed an answer about who I was for me, I think I probably convinced myself that I was bi for a little while, because I used to look myself in the mirror and say I'm straight, I'm gay, and I'm gay always felt right. But I was but how? I'm not attracted to men. So I convinced myself that I was bi for a little bit. And then never really acted on it or anything. I think I just lived under that label for 6 months.
Identifying as they, them, non-binary was still kind of recent. I think I came to terms with they, them and was confident in that maybe only a year ago or 2 years ago. And to this day, when I meet people that I know are not very knowledgeable about pronouns, I'm just oh yeah, just whatever comes out of your mouth, it's fine.
Drag was always something in the back of my mind that made me feel powerful. I would always, not necessarily dress up, but I knew that there was this Sasha Fierce character inside me that was inherently my strength. And I think when I think about myself now, this sort of physical appearance is the manifestation of what my strength looks like, which is inherently feminine, and it's divine feminine.
When I was at university, I remember in Toowoomba, there was this whole sexual deviance kind of law so that they could stop the gays, anyone queer going to clubs, and they'd be termed sexual deviant, and they could stop them from going. So all these drama students would be stopped going to bars because they thought they were all gay. And they're not all gay. They just dress like they are. Calm down.
I was very much caught up in the women's movement at the same time as recognising my sexuality. And there was a phase where people decided that they really didn't want to have patriarchal names. And because my surname was King, Queen was the suggested alternative. Somebody called me DQ, and that name just stuck, and it's been stuck ever since. But I kind of find it appropriate in lots of ways, a bit of a Don Quixote in some way, or drama queen. I can be a bit of a drama queen.
Queen Kong comes from the rugby field. You would notice that I'm built like a brick shit house because I come from a rugby background. I was raised in sports, and so on this rugby field I was very feminine, as I've always been. I think initially it was an insult. People would call me that name because they thought it was because I was queer and flamboyant, but I was really tough, and so I loved it because I am a queen and I'm definitely built like a gorilla, so I embrace it.
I first found the name Adrian when I was trying to hide my Facebook from my girlfriend's parents at the time, and I thought that if I chose a male name, they would be less sus about me being on her friends list. And then people in university started referring to me as Adrian because they'd only known me through Facebook or online, and I kind of stopped correcting them because I really liked it, and I didn't realize I would really like it, and I liked it more than what they used to call me.
I chose Catherine because it was a family name. It was phonetically soft, but it was also strong. And I knew that my journey would need strength and courage.
My mum is one of those mothers who, all she ever wanted was to be a mum, and then as soon as she was a mum, all she ever wanted was to be a grandmother. I think because of that, I had it drilled into my head that you have to have children. And, I don't think I will. I then, had, lists in my head of, names that I want for children, and Rosie was just always the name that I thought if I had a daughter, I would call. But then when it came time to be, you need a name, I was like, well, I'll take that then.
We get caught up in what a label is and pigeonholing ourselves, and I don't see them as labels, I just see them as descriptions, and I find it really comforting to be able to describe how I'm feeling and what I'm doing and what I want from my life and who I want to be.
What I would say to my younger self is hold on, and also listen to your mum, listen to your aunties, listen to the women in your family, because they're going to really teach you how to be a man. Yeah.
I did a lot of self-blame at the time, so yeah, I'd say no, none of that. Just like yourself, you're all right.
And do you think you would have listened to yourself?
Well, that's probably the big thing, isn't it? I probably would not have taken an iota of interest in what I said. I would have told my future self to bugger off. I didn't know anything.
You won't always have to keep cutting pieces off yourself so that people will like you. That at some point, you can just be yourself and people will still look at you the way you want them to.
You don't have to stick by one thing forever. Going by she and they feels really good for me now, but I'm aware that in 5 or 10 years' time, I might have different pronouns, I might identify differently.
There's nothing wrong with you and there's nothing that you need to fix. And I know it's really hard because sometimes you don't really see other people like yourself, but things do get better.
Go easy on yourself, because there was such intense feelings of shame that I was doing the wrong thing for a lot of that, and self-exploration is a good thing.
It's not a big deal. If you feel it, then feel it, talk about it, but it's not you. That's not your whole existence.
Keep an open mind. There's so much of the world to discover, and there's so much of yourself to discover, and you don't have all the answers when you're a kid. Keep an open mind, and things will be difficult, but trust me, life is better when you're out.
I said, yes, I'm gay. I am gay.
My mum would always say to me, you're more.
There was nothing I could do about being publicly outed.
I remember at one point she told me, don't ever go in Mardi Gras, because if someone might see you.
Yeah. I just haven't done serious interviews like this in a while. Okay.
Who was the first person I came out to? That's a really good question.
I think the first person I had to come out to was me, and I don't think I was a very good person to come out to.
The first person I had to come out to was myself. I think I was in denial for a very long time.
The first person I came out to was my friend Claire Watts. She's a saintly human.
Probably my best friend, yeah.
The first person that I came out to when I was still in Malaysia was my best friend Linda.
I never had to come out. It was very obvious to everyone around me that I was either gay or going to become a woman. There was no closet. I glided out of an armoire.
I like to think of coming out as more of a process of like inviting in. I chose to invite in my closest friends.
We were best friends from high school, and we're still best friends today. And yeah, I think I just briefly brought it up, and I'm pretty sure she was like along the lines of like, yeah, well, obviously, like having a best friend. Oh my God, I'm getting emotional. Having like a best friend that didn't like overreact to it and was just like, yeah, I know, was so important because I like didn't have that safety within family or anyone else.
When I came out to my best friend, I didn't expect that response at all. I was hoping that I would have an ally and I would have a friend who, would be supportive. I didn't think she would react the way she did, and she was like, what will your family think about you when, like, don't you want to have kids and family? And I was like, whoa, like, you're the last person I thought I would get this from.
So I realised that I was attracted to the same sex around about when I was 13. And when I told my mum, she took me to a therapist. And so it was this progressive idea of, instead of closing it off and stopping a child's development, we're going to encourage it. Except what the therapist did was tell me, oh, you experience same-sex attraction? You're attracted to other boys? I'm like, well, yeah. So she said, well, that means you're gay. She didn't ask me once about my attraction to women or to people of a different gender to me. Every time I was called gay or told I was gay and forced to feel pressured to sort of keep up that appearance, it eats away at your soul. Being in a closet, no matter what closet that is, keeping a secret is so damaging to who you are. It's funny to sort of go through that zigzag of the way I described it, and it's quite funny to look at it that way of, going from straight to gay to bi now. But the funny thing is that who I actually am has never changed. Who I am has been a dead straight line.
My family always knew that I was, and they never said the word different, and I never say the word different because it means that it's other. My mum would always say to me, you're more. Like, there is more about you, and so when I came out to her, she still cried because it was like news to her because she's a drama queen, that's where I get it from. But she was the first person I spoke to because I knew that I could trust her and I knew I was safe with her.
In terms of coming out, actually putting it on paper or saying it to someone, it was probably to my mother, and it was in a letter.
And was your mother accepting?
She never accepted it. She kind of learned to live with it. But I think it did damage our relationship significantly. She was always upset with me for some reason, and I think that may have been at the core of it. I didn't get married, I didn't have the kids, and fair enough on some level is that she was expecting grandchildren like her friends, and her friends were not sensitive to the fact that she was not going to have grandchildren.
I had a whole series of 3-week relationships. One of these boyfriends gave me a ring to wear, and I wore it on my pinky. And my mother saw it. She picked me up from something, and I wasn't living at home, and she saw the ring and she said, why are you wearing a ring on your pinky? Why don't you get a ring that fits you properly? And I had to say, oh, it was given to me. And she asked me a series of questions, and I'd committed to actually answering them all honestly. He said, why would Robin give you a ring? And he said, oh, because we're seeing each other regularly. And he said, is that dating? And off we went. And she said, are you gay? And I said, yes, I am. I was in tears. I was crying by the end of it. And I can't, with hindsight, I can't work out whether that was because of the relief or because of the disappointment I knew was going to come from that. The disappointment, which lasted for a good, 15 years after that moment.
I think having the support of your parents, I think we really underestimate what that means. And I think for people like myself that come from the cultural background that I come from, I think when you make the decision to inform people of who you are, you do run the risk and you understand the risk of losing them.
My mum actually passed away when I was quite young, so I never had to come out to her, which is kind of a bit of a blessing and also not, because I would have loved to obviously share that with my family, I guess. But also, sometimes it's like, I'm glad that I don't have to have the adversity of coming out to a family who might not be as accepting of me.
The first friend I ever came out to or ever invited into my life and told them hey, this is me. Again, lesbian stereotype. And it was the girl I fell in love with. I told her over the phone, I was really scared. I remember the phone call very vividly. And I remember that she was like, "What's wrong? You can tell me anything." And I was like, I think I like you. She's like, "Well, I like you too." And I was like, no, I think I like you. Like a crush. And she went quiet for a few minutes, and I had was getting really anxious and attached to the landline, and this was back when phones were attached to a landline, and I was using my parents' home phone, and then she said, "Well, what if I like you too?" And I think I got really lucky in that sense, in that the one lesbian stereotype I didn't perpetuate is that I didn't fall for my straight best friend.
There was a moment, and I don't even know when it happened, where my mother shifted. And I was talking to my sister about this, and it was her, she did this. She started to have conversations over a period of time, actually, talking to Mum about accepting who I was. Projecting forward to the idea of what would have been if I died, if I killed myself, if I what that would mean. And so she was working on this the whole time. And something happened where my mother just rang and asked after me and asked after my partner and said, we should meet him. And that was a big thing. That was a big thing.
My parents separated when I was 13, 14. And I've always had a very challenging relationship with my dad. And I don't blame them, because there's, in our small town in Ipoh, there weren't a lot of queer people, even to this day in Malaysia, that are visible. I remember my parents wanted to take me to see a psychiatrist, and my parents would say really mean, hurtful things to me. And I kind of grew up with a lot of trauma based on how my parents would react to my, being queer and gay. I recently reconnected with him, and I didn't want to hide such an important part of who I am, because my identity is in my art, it's in my music, and I can't share all those very important things that I'm doing in life. So I came out to him, and I was ready to I was ready for him to not talk to me anymore. And I was very surprised when he replied, and he told me he's okay about it, and he said to me he wanted me to live my best life. Yeah. And I remember saying something like, "Oh, thank you for accepting me for who I am."
I think the first time I kind of started talking publicly about being queer was doing stand-up, because that's something I do, and I joke about everything that happens in my life, from my job to my friends, and obviously my dating life. And
was there a specific joke you came out with?
I think the joke was something really simple. It was so I got a girlfriend, and then if people were really quiet, I'd be like, "You're homophobic." You should laugh at that. You should be happy for me. I finally found someone. I wasn't worried about how people would react, because when you're a stand-up comic, you're honestly just putting yourself out there.
So if coming out in a public sense is going onto the dance floor and ripping your top off and dancing like crazy to a women's band playing I Am Woman. That was probably the first public I'm here kind of statement.
First time you publicly came out, you were telling me about this dance.
Yes, you want to hear more? Yeah, so what can I say? It was just one of those experiences I've never seen before, and honestly, and I've never seen it again, actually. I don't even know that I can find the word for it. It was completely overwhelming and in a really good way. And I felt like it's one of those peak moments in my life, probably. 200 pairs of breasts. You get a pretty good idea of variation.
I publicly came out on January 21 of 2018. And then I was just sort of sitting there on my computer and I just sort of started typing. And then suddenly there was a big message, and it was back when people still used Facebook, I guess, or people who weren't really old. But I just copied and pasted and just hit send, just shut my computer. I left my phone on my bed. I went to the beach and felt like really symbolic of like jump in the water a man and emerge a beautiful trans woman. But then eventually went home and I just sat on my balcony, had a little happy cry while I read all the supportive messages from everybody. And like I always say, like, I remember like while I was doing that, having the feeling of like, this is the happiest I have ever felt to this point in my life.
I was outed by a newspaper and then a magazine. It was completely beyond my control. I think the first thing I did was I hid, and for a couple of days, because there were calls, people demanding to know if this was true. Had that not happened, I may never have come out as trans. But then I just sort of became careless. I stopped caring because everyone knew anyway. There was also a lot of excitement around it. You know, people sometimes don't realize, they just sort of see you in the paper and they think, oh my God, how amazing, you're in the paper. The hairdressers at the salon I was going to, they were very excited by all the pictures, and they were oohing and ahhing over how gorgeous I looked. You know, but it wasn't the point. The point is these papers outed me. I took that paper to anti-discrimination and I forced them to reword things. I won in conciliation. They agreed to report on transgender people more respectfully, and they did a editor's note on headlines that I demanded be changed. It changed my life. I may not have become a trans advocate had that not happened at that time.
I do not remember the first time I came out publicly, though I do remember David McAllister, my partner of now 15 years, giving an interview with a newspaper and outing me to the world. So now if you put my name into Google, apparently David's name pops up next to it. I go, but you know, it was never really a secret, but it was one of those things that he was so proud of. He put it into an interview.
Was it positive?
The article was positive. It was all about him. That's the other thing. I think it was maybe my ego. I don't think it was about being outed at all, but the idea of going, oh, now I'm your handbag. Oh, great. Why, you know, I'm my own person. So it's a bit of that kind of stuff.
Ooh, I think the first time I publicly came out, I didn't say the words. I'm very much like a doer. You know, and this was at my workplace. Like we were doing shows in theaters all the time. And at one of the opening nights, I didn't even tell anyone who my +1 was. And it was my partner at the time, who was my boyfriend. And I introduced him to the company. And I remember my boss at the time was saying, oh, so you're Sarah. Sarah was Scott. And I lied and said that he was a she. So that was the first time I publicly came out.
I didn't come out at work until I think August of that year, but it was really nice. But it was also really annoying because I sent like a big company email out to everybody, and then just essentially had like a 2-hour admin task the next day responding to everybody who'd said something nice. Like, thank you. Oh God, I wish I hadn't done this actually.
You know, I look back on those old days and I thank God that they are behind us. I'm an executive in a corporation now. And I hope that that's how trans people will be judged in the future, that they can go into corporations and become lawyers and doctors or whatever.
The fact that your sexuality does or doesn't actually affect who you are, you know, your ideas, the way you think might be affected by the cultural milieu you're in. And I think, yes, I see that. But it doesn't affect the quality of what I do. In fact, if anything, it helps me become more articulate, clearer about understanding difference and about embracing those differences in a way in all of the things that I do.
I think if I could go back and give advice to me about coming out, it would probably just be like, don't be scared. Like, it's gonna be good. Like, you know, it's 2018. Like, it's mostly okay.
I think in popular media we have this like idea that coming out is always this like big moment. You're like bursting out of the closet, telling everyone in your life, or like dealing with the acceptance or adversity that comes with coming out. But sometimes coming out can kind of be quiet. Nobody knows or notices, and people kind of learn over time.
Be very wary and really remember that when you are informing people and coming out, you're not seeking acceptance, you know, and you shouldn't be seeking acceptance, because this acceptance needs to come from here for you to be able to inform someone of something that's really special about yourself. I think it's really valid to feel like you want to be accepted. But don't be disappointed if it doesn't go off the way that you expect it to go or the way that you want it to go.
That young self who said, I've got to get out of here, and got in the car and drove away over, you know, unsealed road and with no money and all of that. That was a good decision. That was a really good decision. Somewhere inside I knew that was going to have to happen.
It was really difficult, but it was the best decision I ever made. It was a moment where I finally felt free, a moment where I finally felt able to be the person I am and have the relationships that I wanted to have, and it's enabled me to have just wonderful experiences and find my community.
It's always going to be scary, like telling people about who you are, but you're going to find a lot of allies who will make it an easier process for you, and that there's nothing wrong with who you are. And I think I would tell myself that so many times, because I think for a very long time I didn't believe it.
Oh, the first queer friend that I made. This is actually funny, because the first queer friend that I like very specifically remember.
Gosh, the first queer friend I made.
Who was the first queer friend I made?
So the first queer friend I made was, I don't know if I should tell this story actually, it's kind of funny. They'll probably kill me, but that's fine, they won't figure it out.
The first queer friend I made was my coworker working in retail, Stuart. He was really funny. We'd always be walking around our store, you know, steaming shirts, talking about his very exciting dating life compared to mine. Yeah, looking back, I'm like, one thing all my friends have in common is they're queer and they're Libras, just like me.
And what is it about Libras specifically?
The thing about Libras is they love to laugh, they love aesthetically beautiful things and experiences, and we don't take each other too seriously. We can laugh about the ups and downs that kind of come our way.
I was particularly friendly with the women I was on afternoon shift with, and it was a really good time because we'd get off work reasonably early, 10 o'clock or something, and go and have oysters. I remember going to have an oysters at a place in Burke Street, I think. We'd spend time in each other's homes, and there's that one time I remember when someone had a birthday and somebody came in with an LSD tab or two, and I've always been a bit wary about drugs, but I'm also very curious as well. So we divvied them up, and probably only had about a quarter of a tab each. Never again. I'm never going to do it again.
My eldest sibling, Madison, who was trans, she passed away. It's been about 13 years since she's been gone. Someone that kind of relationship is something that I long, for now in my adult life, to sort of look back at, our childhood and go, oh my God, like that was really like, how do we get through that and be this fabulous, Her approach to everything was always about no one gets left behind and just making sure she was that safe space for many people like myself. So, yeah, this is her. This is Madison. But Madison was, when I was born, she was 10 years older than me. And so she had this fierce maternal energy about her, and she was so protective of me. Like, she knew that I was definitely of her ilk, so she really took me under her wing. I think most of the amazing things about Queen, or the fierce and the strong parts of Queen, really come from Madison. Yeah.
And how important was this bond that you had with Madison? What did it mean to have someone in your life that was not only a family member but a friend, and I guess someone who you could relate to or share your experiences with?
I think it was so important for me because it was so important for me to have someone like Madison in my life, especially during my formative years and just as a child, because she understood the struggle, because she went through it with my father and with the church, and understood how hard it was going to be for me. So in any way, shape or form, she tried to relieve as much pressure. My early days of dancing was always in her room blasting Aqua, the album, and just dancing so ridiculously and just loving every minute. So yeah, she was an integral part of my journey to being not only accepted but just respected. Yeah,
I would say that I kind of made my first queer friends by accident, and I kind of fell into like a little book club. We all read manga, which is like, Japanese comics and Japanese graphic novels, specifically like yaoi, which is like boys love, basically. It's a big phenomenon in Japan. And then kind of through those conversations, I started realizing that these friends that I thought were, super straight, and I was the only queer one, I was the only gay one in the school, I was the only gay in the village. I definitely wasn't the only gay in the village, and my friends kind of started getting more comfortable with the idea of not being straight, or being entirely straight. And one of the first queer friends I made ended up coming out to me as like bisexual. For me, it was just really fun to discuss like being, attracted to women with another person that wasn't just like online or like my reflection.
In high school, there was a girl, and she was like there was a very small group of queer people in my grade or my school in general. And yeah, we like randomly started hanging out. She was one of the only people that like also grew out her armpit hair, and I was like, oh my God, that's so cool. And she was like really into literature and like feminism, and I was just like, so like, wow, this is so cool. And then I remember sitting like on her room floor, and like she put her hand like on my like leg as we were talking, like just having an intimate conversation. And that was like probably my first memory of like queer community person.
I came to Sydney in 1991. I wanted to be a part of Sydney and this vibrant community of LGBT people. This photo is, we're all trans kids, we all came from the Pacific Islands, and the world was really very cruel to us. There was so much abuse and discrimination in those days. We'd sort of come home and we'd tell each other about the most dreadful things that people used to do to us and say to us, and we'd sit there and giggle and laugh at the absurdity of it all. And that's where I learnt to start, turning tragic things into funny stories. Sometimes you've got to do these things to survive mentally. And I learnt that amongst my sisters. Sadly, not all of us survived. Most of us did not survive. And you notice we all got the same hair colour. That's because we used to copy each other. And everyone used to think we were sisters when we'd go out. For me, this memory is still very much cherished.
There wasn't a lot of places to go back then, in the far off days. In fact, we had to make places for ourselves. We even made our own little cafe illegally in a squat in Annandale. And it was called the White Circle, and it was a lesbian place to go and eat. People would volunteer to cook, and there was tables and stuff set around, banquets set around the front rooms, and we'd gather there and meet each other. Women would squat in buildings that were owned by the church or the government, and no one was in them, and they were just going to waste, and women were getting beaten up and they had nowhere to go, so women squatted in these buildings and claimed them and turned them into refuges. Yes, that was a very good thing to do.
I was desperate to connect with other queer people in uni, so I saw that there was a queer social club that would meet on a weekly basis. But that was really hard. I remember the first time I went to that space, I literally sat outside the building for like maybe an hour, contemplating whether or not to go in, because it's also like at the time I was still struggling with accepting my own queer identity and my sexuality. I was like, if I go in, that means, for me, I remember like as like, I don't know, like an 18, 19-year-old, like if you go in, that means you are gay or you're queer. And I wasn't ready to completely say that to myself. So I didn't end up going in. Maybe the second or third time I went back, I had the courage to go in. And so I met a lot of other queer people in uni, which was pretty cool.
I'd been a pretty kind of professionally oriented gay man who just went about their business, and I was in a long-term relationship for most of my 20s into my early 30s. And so when I got out of that relationship, I was going, what's possible? What's open? What can I do? When I was 36, I had what I call my year of adventure. And that was when I drank alcohol for the first time and drank coffee for the first time and had drugs for the first time and all those kind of things, different experiences. And part of that was also these queer spaces. Then I made almost a political decision to be gay, and I couldn't look back. Holy moly, the things I got up to. I do not want anyone out there hearing the things I got up to when I was 36. Number one, too old, but fabulous kind of experiences, sexually, socially, kind of exploring myself and my body and feeling liberated in a kind of queer space. Making spaces for myself and feeling that liberation was so amazing. Because I think even gay is its own form of prison. But this sense of going at 36, exploring a whole range of things that gave me joy and made me feel a little bit more kind of relaxed about who I was.
I reckon the first time that I was in a queer space, it's a bit grim, but it's probably the same as so many people. It's probably like talking to somebody online who was actually some creepy old dude in America. But then I guess there would have been like online forums for like cross-dressers and stuff like that. There would have been like maybe like Reddit forums.
I think an online setting that was like exclusively queer, I joined early on in my sort of journey of coming out and discovering myself, would have been a Facebook group. I think it was like a time when groups were really popping off, and there was one specific one for queer people of color in the area that I lived in, and I joined it, and I I think I met maybe a few people that are in the group in person later on. Just seeing them in that community group made me feel comfortable approaching them in person and being like, hey, I see we're in the same group, we're interacting with the same posts, we're going to the same events, and I think it gave me a little bit more confidence to meet people in person when I can be a little bit shy at first and don't really know how to approach people who I don't already know through some other context.
When I was quite young, I found those virtual spaces. So back then, these are the MySpace days. There were also chat boards, and I could connect with other queer people through that. And I remember we got a group of maybe 4 or 5 of us, and we went along to this meet and greet, and it was terrifying. I had this weird fear, what if someone is there that I know? And this is before I was out at high school. What if someone's there that I know and they tell someone? And then I eventually realized, well, they're probably worried about the same thing. So we sort of have this, it's like you're both holding the same secret. And so you both have that shared understanding. So I realized, actually there's nothing to be afraid of.
Attending my first Mardi Gras was mind-blowing. It was really powerful because I've never seen so many people out. And also I remember when I first moved here, I didn't even know what the rainbow flag represented. It was only through Mardi Gras I learned that, hey, that's actually the color of the rainbow is a queer flag.
It's just so big and huge. I'd never seen anything like it in my life. I like to call it the gay Christmas because it's the one time of the year that we're all actually very nice to each other. I made my debut in the parade on a barge. I sat on a throne and I was Cleopatra, and there was a Caesar placed next to me, and there were Roman soldiers dancing in the front and slaves pulling the thing with ropes, and there were people in the front with palm fronds, and it was really quite, it was a lot of fun.
Ooh, my first Mardi Gras experience was horrible. It was absolutely horrible. I remember, being told you have to experience Pride, you have to experience Mardi Gras. It's just such a space where you get to just be around your community and, feel accepted and loved. And I remember just feeling the absolute opposite. I think this was 2013. It wasn't even that long ago. I remember watching the parade and seeing again, people that don't look like myself. Being looked over in all the clubs, treated really badly in the street, and just going, oh my God, this is so even though all of these big corporations are celebrating Pride and they're doing every marketing campaign to say inclusivity, rainbow flag, I just remember feeling really little and really looked over.
Crowds make me uncomfortable and I don't like drinking, and that's kind of what Mardi Gras season is like in the city, so I don't like to go too often. Growing older, I found different ways to connect with Mardi Gras. I go to more poetry events, I go to more art events, and I kind of find my people there. And that's how I like to celebrate and enjoy Mardi Gras. And if I really feel like watching the parade, I'll watch it on the live stream.
So my first Mardi Gras was nothing to note. I just got too drunk, went to a couple of parties and left, and didn't fully grasp the importance of what the event was. It was probably my second Mardi Gras that I learnt more about the history, the importance of it, the different organisations involved with it, and realised Mardi Gras is more than just a party. It's more than just a social space. It's a movement. It's a protest. It's giving back to the community as well as taking something fun out of it.
The Mardi Gras in 1978 was the first of its kind. It wasn't the first action that anyone took, but it was certainly the first event, and it became so important because it was basically attacked and brutalised by the police. And that is the moment that has been celebrated, for want of a better word, in all following Mardi Gras events. I wasn't at the Mardi Gras march itself, just wanting to make that clear, but I was there very quickly at the cop shop, the Darlinghurst cop shop, when they'd taken everyone off to jail, and we all stayed outside and, and were yelling at the cops. And the cops they were very frightening. They were very intimidating. I wasn't arrested. I wasn't in that lot, but I was at the police headquarters immediately afterwards, like within minutes. We had phone trees. No magic phones then. Phone trees where we'd ring each other up if there was someone needed assistance, and we turned up there. It was really, really scary because the people who'd been arrested, even not arrested, the people who had been there when the cops, descended on them, I think they were all completely traumatised. People's names were printed in the paper, and people lost jobs and they lost their families, and it was just a very damaging thing to do. And it was quite indicative of the situation for homosexual people at that time. There was a lot of gay bashing too then, and murders, terrible stuff. So yes, you can understand the push for some kind of not renovation, it's the word I'd use. There had to be change. There had to be change in the law. There had to be change in the law and people's attitudes. So there was a lot of work before that in terms of making homosexuality legal, and but that seemed to be a turning point. That was when it really hit the fan, if you like, and came very, very strongly into the public notice. There was just so much stuff in the paper about it for quite some time.
My partner, my wife actually, was in a play about the 78ers, and it was really touching to see their stories retold on stage and discovering what went into the struggle in order to make it happen. Like, we're able to celebrate Mardi Gras and it's like fun, colourful, and like having the music we love like blasting on the streets, while back in the 70s there would be queer bars that are raided by police, like you wouldn't be able to assemble in a safe fashion.
And once I realised what Mardi Gras truly stood for, that's when I really, really enjoyed it. That's when I found my place and eventually found my way onto the parade and joined different community groups that I connected with.
And as much as it's amazing to celebrate, it's also very important to acknowledge, where we've come from and the sacrifices that were made, for us to be able to celebrate and, dance and party and listen to Cher and all the other big celebrities that come and make all the money, So, yeah, I think lots of people forget that and, choose to celebrate, which is great. But I think a part of our history is, especially here in Australia, is acknowledging what came before. And I think Australia has an inherent issue with acknowledging history and, the complex history that this land has seen.
Before I'd seen the play, I had no idea. We have a book that Robin Kennedy, who is one of the 79ers, collaborated on. It's like a 78. So 78, oh my God. 78, 79, I'm thinking about 69 for some reason. Okay.
And in what ways did this knowledge change your experience?
Learning about the history of Mardi Gras made me appreciate everything that had to go into the celebration, like the struggle that comes with it. And I felt more grateful, celebrating it and having that history. It's sort of like, when it's your birthday and you're like, oh my God, it's my birthday, it's the best day of the year. But then your mum tells you your birth story and it's harrowing and you're like, what do you mean you're in a hospital for this long and you went through all of this just to have me? And, it's sort of like that, that story of kind of giving birth to a movement. I don't know if that's too much, but yeah, starting the movement so that now we're here.